something really interesting happened as I was scrolling down the endless amount of posts on Facebook, which is usually not where cool things happen. But in this case, well, this case just shows why I'm still on Facebook at all. I saw this post in the free VST plugins group, which is an open group that I can recommend a lot to everyone who has a Facebook account, because that's actually a place where you don't often have people fighting. It's just chill people enjoying audio technology. And there, Ali Ahmed, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, has dropped a link to a beatcommunity.com article about the newly released plugins Tungsten and Cesium, which are both very peculiar names, and this information will be very important soon. Green Oak Software, I have never heard of them. Where does this developer come from, and why are these interfaces looking so stunning is the question. As you can see, I have given this post a love react, not because I think that the plugins are stupid, but because I love the idea that this might be a Midjourney generated plugin UI. And as you can see, I made a disclaimer immediately afterwards that I'm not entirely sure if this is true or not, because I don't want to spread fake news or anything. But you know, the probability that this is made with Midjourney, I would say it's around 99%. I mean, let me show you something that I have in my AI art folder. I have a folder with AI art that I personally like a lot, and there is also some stuff in it that I made myself, like this alternative version of my plugin interface of Nell, or these really cool looking synthesizers, or this synthesizer made by Leonardo da Vinci, or these, well, things. Now, of course, I also used my Midjourney trial to just generate plugin interfaces. I wanted to find out how could we use an AI to generate the images that make a plugin UI look stunning. This was one of the first attempts that I made. At the beginning, I didn't know how to prevent it from creating 3D images. I was prompting stuff like VST plugin, oscillator, vector scope, physical modeling, whatever, you know, to just feed the AI with an idea of the flavor that I want to have. And sometimes it created very interesting images like this, where you have extremely pleasant looking knobs with great lighting and stuff like that, that I would really wish to see in a plugin or on an interface for audio, hardware, whatever. Midjourney doesn't always get letters correct. It just looks like gibberish, even on the numbers, but that doesn't matter. The overall image just makes a lot of sense. Now, at some point, I actually figured out how to make it two-dimensional, mainly by prompting things like 2D interface or UI along with VST plugins, so that it knows that I'm not searching for a marketing image, but for a screenshot. Yeah, you can also prompt screenshot along with it. You know, stuff that you would also tag along with your screenshot if you put one of them online. Now we can see some similarities here already with the interfaces of these plugins. For example, Midjourney tends to just add some VU meters to things, or some other kind of meters that don't really make sense, but that have needles and look cool. And that's exactly what we see here as well in Tungsten. And also Tungsten, you know, what is Tungsten supposed to mean? And Cesium. You could very well imagine that this is just the name that Midjourney has given these plugins, and they just went along with it for fun because it's cool. This plugin unfortunately doesn't have a name as far as I can see, but we will see an example of that very soon. Now, another thing that I also noticed about Midjourney is that it confuses what a knob should be. I think the reason for that is that when you Google knob, you find mostly doorknobs and not plug-in knobs. So I think in my prompts I had something like knob. I wanted it to generate plug-in interfaces where there are a lot of knobs, because sometimes Midjourney thinks that it just has to make a flashy design but without giving the user any controls on the interface. I wanted to prevent that and always wrote something like knob along with it, until I realized that it probably then confused the knobs with doorknobs. And you can see that here, like these screws at the side, they look a little bit like they could also be doorknobs, because the AI is unsure what exactly it should draw. And also these things, someone went over these images and, you know, refined them so that the AI source doesn't look so obvious. But you know, this whole perfect lighting stuff, that just reminds me totally of how the AI draws images. And also the way the layouts work, like that there is a ton of space only for a single control and that everything on this control is hyper detailed. That just totally looks like the style of Midjourney. Now check out this image that I created. Now you can already see what I mean with the random names. 1APRK GSTTHILC. So this would already be a valid name that you can just type out and decide that your plugin is called like that. What do we have here? Sort of a preset browser, a lot of unnecessary visuals that look cool, sort of an analyzer that probably doesn't work, these knobs that are somewhere in between a plugin knob, a door knob and a screw, more of these. It's really hard to tell sometimes what should be a control and what not, except these are definitely buttons, and there is a little screen, more screens. What is this? Is this a screw or a knob? In which case these two would also be knobs. Okay, well, there is not no control, but as you can see, the controls are really, well, there is not a lot of control on an interface like this. That's why I tried to prompt these kind of things. I couldn't decide which image to take at first. These were the ones that I had to choose from. As you can see, they all have something cool about them, and all of them also have something not so cool about them. So it's really hard to decide. But yeah, as you can see, the lighting can be extremely interesting, and this looks so much like a doorknob. You cannot see the tick that shows the actual value of the parameter, and that's something that, in my opinion, differentiates it from a real knob a lot. And if we look at these plugin parameters, then we can also imagine that these ticks have just been added artificially after the base image was created. That's how I expect it to have worked out. I also want to share with you these attempts to create plugin UIs. That was also some of my initial stuff. By the way, I also often prompted Steampunk along with VST plugin and my other stuff, because I wanted that Steampunk look to be in more plugins. I just think that there are not a lot of plugins yet with a nice Steampunk look, and most of them are from Waves, which is a company. I don't buy the plugins of them, so I don't really have a benefit from them releasing Steampunk plugins. I need more other developers to do that, so I decided to just go with it. All these tones of brown and the other colors and the layout, the shadows, the lighting, it all just fits perfectly to these plugins, except maybe that this one is a little more greenish, but you know, we can't know what they put in their prompt. Maybe they just put in their greenish or something like that, or aluminium, I don't know. One thing that I added in these prompts was award winning, because I thought to myself, if I wanna be a successful VST developer, maybe I should just prompt award winning and then just make the plugin that it shows me and I will win awards. But it's not as easy as that, because especially when you're prompting award winning, you get a lot of these marketing type photos that kind of resemble these plugin images, where plugin developers pretend like their plugins are 3D objects, which they are not. So it's kind of useless to have these images here, at least if you just want to plug in the images directly into a project and let's go. But these would need some serious rework in a 3D engine. I also got these images when I prompted award winning. It's interesting how many different types of awards plugins can win. They can win the award, but also the rarest award. This plugin won the very famous Ntuuli Ink.org award. It's the Silic Chill plugin. And one of my favorite plugins, Kuzir Isail Zari Uiik. I use it in every track. No, but seriously, I think this one is the coolest. The only problem is I don't see any controls. Like, again, this looks like door knobs, but if these things were real knobs, then it might be useful. Usually plugins are in this typical format of screens, like a rectangle, and this is definitely not in the shape of a rectangle. So if you wanted to put that into a rectangle, then you would lose a lot of screen space only for the attempt to make this look like a violin or guitar, what this is supposed to be, I don't know, or cello. But still, it is definitely inspiring me, and it's actually opening some questions to me UI and UX wise, like what if there was a plugin format that kind of transcends this idea that a plugin always has to be a rectangle. I know that would mean that it performs a little bit worse, because computers are just not made to work with complex shapes all the time, but still, computers have become very good now, and I think it is time to just stop thinking in such narrow ways about plugin interfaces. And I'm glad that AI gives me these kind of ideas. I think that's one of the big strengths of using AI for development and design, because AI can just transcend the limitations that we just put on our own minds in the background without even noticing it, because we know, oh, this would be very complicated to accomplish. You know, sometimes without realizing, you're thinking, oh, this would be very complex, so maybe let's try doing something differently. But an AI who doesn't have this issue, because it doesn't have to implement that later, can just let the ideas flow, and even though it might take 1,000 years to realize them in practice, it will just give me the idea anyway and confront me with the concept that my ideas are limited. And that's what I appreciate about AI. Here, this dude is basically coming up with all of these ideas. Or maybe it's this one. And I'm this one when I'm using the ideas. And society is this one when they accept it. Or this one. This is not something that I made myself. That's just something that I found on the Midjourney server. I just really love the intricate detail on this lens. I just saved it because it also looks kind of like an interface a bit. Like one of the 3D images that I got, they also looked a little bit like this, you know. We also have these little screws here that cannot really be identified clearly as screws, but could also be something different. It is definitely kind of similar. Also this one. This is where I live after I have released all of my award-winning plugin interfaces. And this is where I go for my holiday when I'm rich and everything. This is what my plugin now would look like if the people who made Cyberpunk had designed it. I want you to check out some other aspect about these plugin interfaces, which is that they don't have perfect symmetry, which obviously makes sense, because when the lighting comes from one side, then it should look different on one side or the other. But you know, who would put so much thought into an interface like that and make the left side look different than the right side of this thing? That just requires a lot of thought. Now you could argue that maybe they are just having really good designers at Green Oak Software. But when you go to the website of Green Oak Software, which has the most plain looking website ever, then you see that before they released Tungsten and Cesium, they released Crystal. And Crystal is a super plain Windows 95 looking plugin. I don't know, is it even a plugin? Yeah, it is a plugin with a lot of pretty generic drop-down menus and sliders, not even knobs. So what kind of step was that from Crystal to Cesium and Tungsten? I want someone to tell me what kind of step that was. If not, AI. Let's check out how these plugins sound. Okay, this is a creative delay effect. It's pretty cool. Actually, I should test it myself sometime. And Cesium. I would describe this as a mostly generic sounding chorus effect, but it's definitely cool. The random oscillation might be really interesting. I don't know. Also thick. Can decide if it should be thick or not. Interesting. After I dropped my comment about assuming that these plugins were AI generated, I was talked to by Tomislav Zlatic. I hope I'm more or less pronouncing that correctly. If not, then sorry. You are a cool dude. Thanks for bringing me into this, because he wrote an article for BPB in which he also mentioned me and my assumptions about this AI generated user interfaces, and also made some advertisement for my last plugin release, ADSR. Thanks for that. That is very much appreciated. And a link to my YouTube channel. Nice, nice. A lot of times people argue that AI generated art is just stealing other people's art, and that therefore it is not as valid as some originally made art. But I argue that especially stuff like Midjourney, that has been around for a while now, really has its own style. Because you know, when you're scrolling down Instagram or Facebook and you see a bunch of images that were made with Midjourney, your brain just immediately says, Midjourney. This is Midjourney. This just has to be Midjourney. Of course, you can never be 100% sure, but when you've seen a lot of Midjourney art, then you're just seeing that and just thinking that. And oftentimes you're right. I think it's kind of a meta style, because you know, Midjourney tries to replicate lots of styles, and you can give it prompts where you're just saying in the style of this, in the style of that, not in the style of this, not in the style of that. But at the end of the day, it all looks like Midjourney, no matter which style you choose. And that's kind of interesting, because it kind of transcends transcends the idea of style. It's like a style on top of styles. And that's what really fascinates me. It is definitely something that I find very inviting, because from an artsy point of view, it is just expanding our ideas of style, and getting the mind expanded by stuff is always something that we should value very highly, in my opinion. And that's my opinion when completely disregarding all of the moral issues of the process of how the AI is generated. And that's why I would say AI art has a lot of fascinating properties to it, and all of the stuff that is not fascinating but rather annoying about it is all just economic stuff. We shouldn't let art progress be held back by economical problems, because economics is not what makes art art. Art is what makes art art.